So French hate France right now. They let so many Muslims in. It's going to turn into a third world country with the Sharia law.
I just covered France, the French elections on my last podcast. It's a disaster. You know, it took me like 3 hours just to understand their election process. It was so confusing.
But it's genius. What they did is genius.
Oh, yeah.
She won, but she lost.
Yeah. Well, Macron was looking at the European election, and he was like, uh-oh, this is going to happen in France.
Yes.
And so he called this immediate emergency parliamentary election 3 years early, by the way. And he made a deal with the devil. He went to the far left party, and he goes, hey, there's 300 candidates he convinced to give up their seats so the far left could take them. And so
explain it to the audience. What happened there?
Yeah, so in France they have parliamentary elections every 5 years, I believe, and then there's the Europeans that have their own elections, like as European states. That part's kind of confusing to me, but there was a trend, and this is what matters to the U.S. There was a trend towards the right.
The right
in the UK and in Europe in general, right? A lot of it had to do with the open border policy, the rising crime, the loss of national identity. You see this all over the place: Denmark, Sweden, the UK, etc.
So Italy is right, Hungary is right, Netherlands went right with coalition.
Right.
Who else is right?
Well, we thought France was going that way and the UK, but then there were some upsets. So yeah, so there's this trend going to the right. I call it a trend towards common sense, right? The globalists are having setbacks. Now, Emmanuel Macron, who's the president of France, he saw this in European elections and decided, instead of waiting the full term to have the parliamentary elections, that he would call an early vote. I guess in France they have the power to do that. So he calls it early. And during the parliamentary, so I have to explain that part. So the parliamentary seats, I think you have to have 289 or something to hold a majority.
The majority, yes.
And then basically the majority in parliament ends up choosing who the president's going to be. It's kind of a weird system. So it looked like to Macron that he was going to lose. So he calls this early election. They have first day counts, votes, and Marine Le Pen she's the conservative, the right. She just destroys them. More votes than ever before in the history of her party,
yes.
Right? So Macron, the president, he sees that and he panics. And he goes to this far left extremist group that's like half jihadist, half socialist. On our podcast we did, I read through the list of the different ideologies represented, the groups. And every single one of them has the title communist or socialist, every single one. So Macron's like, oh, I'm going to lose. So he goes to these far left people and he goes, hey, let's make a deal. I'm going to have candidates drop out of 300 seats in this parliamentary so you guys can take them. And between the both of us coming together, we can beat the conservatives that are coming in. And so in a 24-hour period, it went from Macron was losing and the next day, Macron, the far left was winning.
Left.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And something obviously very similar. This is how you know they all go to the same, pool parties. They did the same thing in America, right? Doesn't it sound familiar? Like overnight, Joe Biden's votes skyrocket. You see traditional Democrats, older Democrats from the 90s, inviting far left extremists like Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, the absolute psychotic people. They made a deal with the devil. That's what Macron did. They bring these people in, and then just like you see in the U.S., they lost control of them. Nancy Pelosi does not like the squad or those people. She's said as much. But they made a deal with them because they hated conservatives so much. They hate God so much. They don't want to allow that influence. They want to change America. And so they did what Macron did. They bring in these far left extremists, but then they can't check them anymore. They can't control them. And so you see riots and burning and just insane, lies. So anyways, France is essentially now handed over to like far left jihadists. It's insane. And you know what they did to celebrate?
They burned the Paris down.
They destroyed Paris. They graffitied all over the monuments. They lit things on fire. And that's when they win. Imagine what happens when they lose. Well,
that's one of the
we're going to find out this fall.
It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world, Paris. I've been to Paris. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I've been to 2013. It was amazing. Right now, what I see on Twitter, on X,
there's so much potential in France. There's good people there. It's a beautiful city, rich in history. My brother was in the French Foreign Legion, so I paid a little more attention to France in recent years with my brother being in the Legion. It's really sad because same thing that you're describing, right? There's always, you have to be careful what you trust and what you see in geopolitics because there's always two opposing forces, right? Just like we see all the crazy leftists and we see jihadis burning the city down, there's also people there that want to, save their country. I would say the same thing about the U.S. when they see Joe Biden and they see like the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was treasonous, a disaster. The world is looking at that like, oh, America. And I'm like, no, it's not America. It's the Democrats. It's the far left in that party, right? And that's the same thing I'm saying with the government. Like when people say the government, it's like, well, hold on. It's identify who in the government, right? There are people there doing bad things, and we need to deal with that. But you don't throw the basket out with the baby. It's not the whole thing that's the problem. It's the people that are manipulating and lying, and it's these ideologues that believe in really anti-American rhetoric. That's the problem.